victory and the agony of defeat.
Great ball around the corner, Petticini. He beats them all. Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle. Sharks coming through. None of them can hold this.
Alrighty, let me just bring in Craig and we'll get started. G'day guys, it's John, also known as 4020, and joining me for another episode of the Tip Sheet in instant reaction format is my good mate Sixties. Not coming to you on the result we're looking for, with the Parramatta Eels getting absolutely walloped in Darwin, and we'll talk about that shortly. But big fella, it's still a bit humid in Sydney, so it's emulating the conditions up in Darwin, but nowhere near as bad as what we saw there with 85% humidity. And the Parramatta Eels, they wilted once again up in the top end.
John, I can't see you at the moment, mate. I don't know if you can bring yourself in.
Pop that there. There we go. I've got about 80 different settings I'm juggling at the moment, but we got there.
Okay. First of all, thanks to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and of course Paraleagues. But John, I'm fuming. I'm absolutely, I'm lucky. I do my best not to drop F-bombs here, John, but I want to start off in the order with which I'm fuming about things.
It was a race to the bottom for a few different parties today, so I'm sure that you're probably going to be touching on that.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm fuming at our team.
Mm-hmm.
The level of incompetence that just was on display, I'm sorry, and you know how passionately I feel about Parramatta, the jersey, and I'm a big supporter of the players, right? That just was. I'm sorry.
40% football.
It embarrassed the jersey tonight. It really did. Next thing I'm angry about is I'm angry about us ever going to Darwin, right? Because we've now lost the last four in a row.
Oh, yeah.
Last four in a row, and three of those performances have been absolutely disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. And I said all along that we needed to end this partnership, and I'm glad that it has ended now, and the people in the club could see the light with that. They knew the decision had to be made, but the decision should always be to take the team to where they will have the best possible chance of winning, and we did the opposite here with this. Now, that's not excusing the team one bit, not one iota, because there were two teams out there tonight playing in exactly the same conditions as there have been for the last 4 years, but there is something inherently wrong with our team and the way they perform to get the results that they do up there. And one of those results, I think, was in 2022 when we made the grand final. We got hammered
by the Cowboys, 30-6, I think.
Yeah. The last thing that I'm fuming about is the officiating. That was one of the most incompetent refereeing, officiating displays right across that I've ever seen. And, I mean, look, I could also be angry about the rugby league gods because, man, oh, man, I'd never seen a match where the bounce of the ball and every possible call seemed to go one way. Again, there is not a scrap of excuse for the team in that regard. I'm just angry all round, mate. I'm just fuming all round because there is. Look, I better let you take over from here, John, because I'm almost lost for words, and I'm rarely lost for words. But what can you say about a 50-12 performance? I would have thought that, given that this was the end of the trip up to Darwin, that they put up a little bit of an effort. But when you have, and let's go over some of these, the key team stats, the errors led to 44% possession.
And that was up from half-time as well. The first half was even worse.
a 65% completion rate, just smashed by the Raiders in every metric. Then we get into the things like the missed tackles, 44 missed tackles to 21, 15 errors to 6, 7 penalties conceded to 4, 4 ruck infringements to 2. There are some players who would not want to go through their individual stats tonight. Because
we're going to though. We have to actually put the spotlight on a few players. I think that Riles has no choice but to pull the trigger on at this point. In chat, I mean, I see Sean Lane being singled out, and I say singled out deservedly. He was awful tonight, and I think we need to explore some options there. But you sort of said to me, 60s, you're struggling for words, which wasn't true, by the way. You've always had a way to find something in the well, but what really frustrates me here is that beyond anything again, where, like you said, that it was the last game in Darwin, so surely they'd find something in their reserves. Surely they'd find something from last week to build on and try and spark a bit of fire in the belly, which we didn't really see. It's that the scoreline says 50-12, but the reality is that Canberra weren't great today. This is another team that has put a score on us almost single-handedly on the back of our own ineptitude. And there was... Look, I am pretty upset about... Is it White Raymond? Was he the man at the whistle on this one? Yeah, it was. Yeah, he had an absolute shock. And like I said, it was a race at the bottom between he and the Parramatta Eels tonight. Both parties were genuinely diabolical. But the Raiders at the end scored a few flashy tries. But for large stretches of that game, they were literally just capitalising on Parramatta mistakes, throwing... I wouldn't even say shapes at the Eels. They were just spreading the ball around and the Eels were falling off tackles. They end up running away with the game, but they were not great. And this is another game like the West Tigers, like Manly, and at least the Bulldogs were gritty and they're undefeated, so we knew that's sort of their baseline. But that's another game you can throw onto that docket where the Eels have just really paved the way for their opposition to win the game. So really, really frustrating stuff. And just not even wasting breath on the conversation around Darwin, because we are officially closing the chapter, that torrid and sordid chapter in our club's history on this venue. But really, really frustrating, because a win here has the Eels legitimately back in the hunt, not necessarily for finals football, but for a decent season. And now we go into that Easter Monday clash against the Tigers, searching for momentum one more time after getting our backsides handed to us up in the top end.
Yeah, and just that, as you said, the magnitude of the loss against a team who had a collection of good moments throughout the game but didn't play a great 80 minutes of football. And that's probably one of the more angering things about this performance. Like the enormity of the ineptitude was... If it wasn't like just the simple lost possession, and I understand it's difficult conditions up there in Darwin, but again, there's two teams that are in those conditions, and one of them consistently made errors throughout. The team that's made a lot of trips up there and should be used to the conditions and know what to expect. And then you have to talk about the arm grabbing in defence. Now, and
players not getting back to marker, and then players not pushing up off the goal line. And there was some overlap between all of those factors there. But, defensively, really, really ordinary. And, I don't know if you're going to be singling out any players, 60s, because I certainly have some names. But it's definitely not good enough across the entirety of the team.
Look, I've had a lot of messages sent to me saying the Eels obviously aren't fit. No, they're fit. But we talked about this in the preview.
It was a big warning to the team. It really was. Yeah. It was the one thing you can't do in Darwin.
Yeah, if you go turning that ball over, if you have to do all that extra work in defence, as you said to me in a text message, John, it summed it up perfectly. It is football suicide.
Yeah,
It is absolutely football
it costs you the
suicide.
game in a normal venue. It is football suicide in Darwin. You are not winning. And we've seen it with the Eels in prior games in Darwin where the mistakes crept in. They lost control of the arm wrestle through the middle. Opposition started getting back-to-back sets. And it doesn't snowball because you're in the tropics, but whatever the tropical equivalent of a snowball is, a tsunami, it happens very, very quickly.
John, I don't know what the Eels are going to do because I think both players on the edge back rowers are struggling for form.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
If there were players putting their hand up, both Gideon and Sean would probably be shaking hands with Nathan Kalis this coming week.
Kelmer has been better in the last 2 weeks. He was dropped for as much as what I've seen from Sean Lane today. So,
yeah,
will Jason Rolls be consistent? I don't know.
Defensively, I've still got my concerns with Kelmer.
But Sean Lane's offering you not much more than that side of the ball, and at least Kelmer might give you something in attack. Maybe, I don't know. We can't throw it to a young player right now. Will Latu's injured and also second tier, so even if he was available for selection, which he might be in a week or two, he still wouldn't be eligible for NRL. I don't know. Charlie Geimer to an edge, maybe just someone to do a job there. Dan Keir, he's a player that at least you're going to get effort, and he's not going to be a flashy, toolsy superstar, but he is a player that will give you your 30 tackles a game and run the ball up for 80 metres a game and get involved. So maybe that's an option. It's not the sexy
Would you play
option.
Maddo on the edge now?
Well, Maddo might not be available next week. He's got to face a hip drop tackle, which I did see a question from Slayer. Yeah, Slayer said, do we think Maddo should be worried about missing any games? I say throw the ball onto the roulette table for the judiciary because I don't know.
I think we know what our record is with judiciary.
Yeah, he could get 2 weeks. He could get nothing. It's who knows. So I'm not sure what. I think he's the only player who's got anything to worry about in terms of the MRC and the judiciary coming out of this game. I don't think there was anything else. Just trying to recall. And I don't think in Reggie's nothing really popped out in terms of charges or injuries. So I don't think the club's going to have too much of a restricted deck to deal with next Team West Tuesday. But
maybe, John, they have to. Well, look, I'm hoping that Jack Williams is available next week, and it would be coming back maybe a little bit earlier than planned. But I'm hoping that he would be available. I would strongly consider playing Hopgood on the edge. I'm going to disagree with using him at dummy half.
I think Hopgood's fighting to hold his place in the team, honestly.
Yeah.
If we're being brutally honest here, I spoke about players that struggled to get back to marker. One of those early tries was predicated on him not getting back to marker. And opening up
and then there was the pass from dummy half that went to no one. Like I think it went right.
I put on the coach. I think that Jason Rolls has gotten too cute playing around dummy half, trying to protect Riley from starting when he's just got to bite the bullet and put him in as a starting dummy half. The forward pass I think is more of a coaching error. The not getting back to dummy half, that's something that we've seen symptomatic with, at least I've seen symptomatic with Jermaine. He's been good for it a couple times a game across the last few weeks, and unfortunate opposition in the Canterbury game when Saluka Fafita crossed for that easy try, and then obviously tonight there's been tries taking advantage of that slowness to get back to marker.
Well, look, that's one of the KPIs that Riles is looking for, is that speed to get into position in defence, because then that allows the team to get up quickly off the line. If he's not getting back there, he's missing his mark for the minimum expectation with the team. But they've really got to sort out that edge. Defensively, we were just woeful tonight. There was no hit and stick. We were brutalised in the physical contest tonight, and it just got worse. The longer the match went on, of course, the worse it got, because you got the Darwin conditions and one team playing with the ball, the other one just bumbling and stumbling and handing it back time after time. And some of the things that we saw from experienced players, it just like it was like there was panic play. And I get there was scoreboard pressure, but they weren't getting that. They weren't getting those points back. You know, they just needed to work within the systems to set a platform for next week. And instead, what they did was collapse even further and make their job harder to get their minds focused on this coming week. Now, I'd like to think that there's some sort of chance that Mitch Moses plays this week. I'd like to think there's some sort of chance that Jack Williams plays this week. But my goodness, two players aren't going to make too much difference when you're looking at what we saw tonight. Now, if this was just the Darwin game this year, you'd almost go, well, good riddance to Darwin, and we just go back on track from here. Unfortunately, this is what we exactly saw in the first 2 weeks of this season. It was a return to the worst of the worst tonight. There's no other way of putting it, John. Like, it was a diabolical performance. If Jason Riles can find anything within that he's happy with, I'll be stunned. He probably won't throw players under the bus, but I'll be stunned if he can talk in any sort of positive manner after that, because it was, as I said, it was disgraceful. It was just as bad as last year's capitulation against a reserve-grade Dolphins team. And the reason I say that it's just as bad is because, as you said, John, the Raiders didn't put together 80 minutes of quality football. They played in patches, and those patches shredded us. Their patches shredded us. Yeah, just disgraceful. There's no other word for it. So, John, unless you want to talk some individual players or stats, I don't know that there's too much I can really say from this point on.
Yeah, I mean, individually, there were some players that tried.
Look, let's for a start, say something positive about Bailey Simonson.
Yeah, look,
he busted his ass tonight,
and that is Bailey to a T, isn't it? He is 100% heart, 100% effort, and he's got some quality to back it up too. Don't get me wrong; it's not like he's just out there trying hard and not much else. He went for 200 meters off 19 carries coming back from that knee injury. And I know he's had a couple of games in Reggie's, but he did a lot right today. Some really strong runs. He was actually trying to get in the Raiders' face and spur something, but didn't have much support. I thought Azara Yongi, again, tried hard with little opportunity. I've seen it in chat, and I do acknowledge that it was a very mercurial game in that regard. But Will did try, although I can see people in chat criticising him, and you were also vocally to me in text not happy with his effort in the first half, and I do get that. The problem, I guess, is that he tries hard and he gets heavily involved running the ball, but we haven't seen that conversion to a genuine class centre at the top level of his game, and that's been frustrating. So I wouldn't call it a good game for Will by any measure. And then probably the only other player that's worth shouting out was Luca Moretti, who was the only forward that had any real impact across the full stint deployed onto the field. A lot of other players just, I acknowledge we barely had the ball. We ended up with 44% of the ball, and a lot of that was our backs carting it out. But we had forwards, Ofungahi, 54 metres, Barlaw, 46 metres, Lane, 55 metres, Katonga, 99, Hopgood, 49, Walker, 81, Guyman, 9. Kid didn't play, so it's not his fault. Madison, 25. Our pack was incredibly ineffective today. And that has been a calling card of all our bad games at Darwin, as our pack just gets rolled off the field, regardless of its shape, configuration, structure. We had big packs under Brett Arthur. We had a light pack under Jason Riles, and we've been absolutely pounded off the park in all those losses.
John, when it comes to the individual performances, you did a pretty good job just then of naming the players that needed to be named for acknowledgement. One of the things that really concerned me, however, was just how evenly spread some of those errors were. Like it was almost like every player
wanted to get in on the action.
Contributed to the errors. Yeah.
If I actually look at the errors, where is the error tracker here? Yeah, so we had, if I'm going to do some counting, 5, 6, 8, 10 players, 10 of our 17 players, no, 10 of our, 10 of our 17 players made errors. So well over half the team, there. And just not good enough, isn't it? Like, again, going back to that idea that it's not rocket science or rocket surgery, if you want to do the old mixed up meme there. You play any football game with that kind of split of possession, with that kind of completion rate, you're going to struggle. Throw in the tropics up in Darwin, and you were literally killing yourself. And we saw that from our players. They were absolutely exhausted by the time halftime was upon them, to the point where the Raiders scored that last try. And the Raiders, well, yeah, they were fatigued because it was Darwin. They looked so much fresher than us. And it wasn't even a case of one team training better in the preseason. That was just disrespecting the football and doing stupid shit and paying the price for it.
Yeah, when Fox went to halftime, they had a chat with Hudson, wasn't it, on the sideline?
He was in his element. He was in his element there. You could tell. Yeah.
He was absolutely in his element. He looked really relaxed. Didn't look like he just played 40 minutes of football up in the tropics. Very comfortable about how they were performing, and why wouldn't he, given what had just unfolded? But this is what I want to emphasise about the coach killer errors that we were making, is that if you make those sorts of errors, it's logical. It's so straightforward that you are going to be putting yourself under defensive pressure because you're constantly handing the ball over. And we were handing it over. Like, I think there was somewhere we'd barely get, like, it was like first tackle or zero tackle. We were handing the ball straight back. And you can't do that and expect that you're going to be competing, because you're going to be that exhausted in defence from all the work that you're having to do after you've handed the ball back to the opposition. The Canberra had so much quality ball, but again, in those conditions, the Eels was just simply on the back foot for the entire night. It was just the backpedaling, the arm grabbing. It was really just angering to watch. You can probably tell I'm triggered after watching that game. It's just,
I don't think there's an Eels fan out there that is not like violently upset after what we saw there, because we know that even for our struggles this year, the team should be a lot better than what we put on display tonight. And again, it comes back to stuff that we always talk about, and you hear a lot of coaches talk about and players talk about, controlling what you can control when it comes to rugby league. Because when you stop doing that, you give your opponent such a massive leg up. The Eels were not controlling anything today. They copped a torrent of terrible calls. Don't get me wrong. I thought that the officiating was truly cooked today. It was really, really bad. But the reality is that even with those calls, the Parramatta Eels made a lot of their own bad luck. They still defended like dog shit. They still dropped the ball cold on multiple occasions. They still just didn't, mark up against Canberra in man-to-man situations. Yes, they suffered, and there was some terrible football luck too. Riley Smith and Dean Hawkins both laced brilliant clearing kicks that were 40-20s 99 times out of 100 in other games. Didn't go their way. And the problem is that on that second 40-20, the kick chase was putrid, and the Raiders turned what should have been a 40-20 or a tackle 1 metre off their goal line into a 45-metre return that puts them on the attack in Parramatta's half. And that was really symbolic of everything that was wrong with the Parramatta Eels today.
and also even on that first one from Dean Hawkins. I mean, it literally, as it was about to bounce into touch,
a magnet underneath the ground just pulled it down. It just stopped. Yeah,
it was there was it wasn't kicked with backspin. It's rolled forward the first couple of bounces, and then, as you said, it's like there was a magnet under the ground that's just pulled it straight back down and then sent it in the other direction when there was no momentum at all that should have indicated that it was going to bounce in the opposite direction.
There's a comment from Scott Whitney, which was something I was going to bring up, sort of speaking towards the refereeing, and probably the most telling moment in this game that really spoke. If a picture told you 1,000 words, get my idiom correct, Xavier Savage's reaction to the penalty try 60s. He just goes, "Are you kidding?"
Yeah.
Like, to the letter of the law, he was impeded. But we all know that he actually wasn't slowed down at all by Addo-Carr doing that for 1/10 of a second across his shoulder. He still got there and knocked it on. So, but the fact that he was given the penalty try and the player goes, "Are you serious?" Like, just tells you everything. And then the fact that 2 minutes later, Bailey Simonson is pushed in the back trying to compete for a ball in his own line off the kick and it's missed, leading to that bizarre dropout sequence where Josh Addo-Carr passed off the ground forwards. Just be consistent, please. Like, if you're going to be shit, be consistently shit. But we can't get that much from the officials.
I thought they were consistently shit tonight.
Well,
now tell me about as well the lead up to the Raiders try, where on the last tackle they put the ball up in the air over on the right side and then did the tap back, and then there was the scramble for the ball, and Jamal Fogarty was being tackled and was throwing the ball away. Now, as far as I could see, the ball went forward out of his hands, and the Eels ended up like kicking the ball forward. The Raiders got it back, and then they lost it to Dean Hawkins. And then when he was being tackled, he then lost the ball, and then the Raiders got it, went over on the left.
We played our advantage there, clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly. You can run the ball 45 metres and not take your advantage with other referees, but we took our advantage there.
He just completely, and I know the humour that the sarcasm that's coming there from you, John, but he completely missed the knock on.
Yeah. And just like how in the lead up to the opening try of the game, which, again, Joseph Tapine should not have scored the try. It was very soft. How was that a strip? And then we had is this the most Parramatta thing ever? We finally execute a drop-off strip perfectly. Dylan Walker makes a signal. The players drop off. I think it was Riley Smith and someone else. He reefs it out, and the referee has a silent held call.
Yeah.
And we cop the penalty, which puts them up by 14 points when that was in the midst of our brief window of momentum in the second half. It's, like I said, it was a race to the bottom between the Parramatta Eels and the officials. And
we won.
And unfortunately, the Eels won that race. Yes, that's what I was going to, is that we will sit here and we will bitch and gripe and moan about how bad some of those calls were. But like I said before that, preempting all of this discussion, the reality is that you need to control what you can control. And the Eels failed miserably in that regard. They were their own worst enemy for the third or fourth time this year.
Yeah. So where to from here, John? Because let's just mention as well that we had a couple of victories in the lower grades today.
Yeah, we can talk about those. I did put it in the blurb for the podcast. The doubleheader out at Leacomoval saw the Eels prevail on both fronts, although the Reggies did their best in the second half to tank a win. They forgot how to play football passages in the second half, but Jersey Flegg, very impressive. 44-6 victors. Newcastle. That's how cooked my brain is right now. New South Wales Cup, Parramatta Eels prevailing 28-20 over the Raiders. Do we see or can we foresee any changes coming out of that? Well, first off, who are the eligible players, 60s? Because it is still pre-round 10. So you can only be playing top 30 development or players of dispensation. And looking at the field here, I mean, Sam Tuivasa went back to Reggie's. He's definitely a candidate to come back in the first grade. Him getting put back in the Reggie's, I wouldn't read too much into it as fans. I think it's, again, a consideration that rookies will run into a wall. It just happens. It is a fact of professional sports. And I think that Riles and company are trying to manage their big bookend there to prevent him from falling off a cliff and sort of easing that cushion into the inevitable wall that he's going to hit. So Sam comes into consideration. There's Kelmer. Bryce Cartwright will be lucky to be picked in reserve grade next week. He was unfortunately awful. He really struggled in this game, took all the wrong options. Matt Dury's back. He was a first 17 pick player before he got injured, so he'll come into selection consideration. But after that, Tony Mattielli got bumped back to the bench because of Sam coming into the team. So I think he's behind Sam. Oh, I think it's pretty safe to suggest that he's behind Sam and Matt. But I don't know. Joash Papali doesn't help the issues that the team has. Very talented young player. Love to see him get a chance at first grade at some point, but he's not going to be able to cart it up through the middle and hold on to the ball and make his tackles around the ruck. So I don't think Joash is a consideration. And it sort of puts us in a tough spot.
Even though as we before we were talking about there are, the Riles really needs to make some changes. What does he do? I mean, we've just now looked at the New South Wales Cup team and said, well, there's probably not the options there for first grade because there's a lot of players you haven't got eligible. If I look at the ones that are eligible out of today's game, the eligible players were Hayes Dunster, Joash Papali'i, Brendan Hands, Sam Tuivasa, Kelma Tuolangi, Bryce Cartwright, Matt Dury, and Tony Mattielli. That's it. So, and if we look at the Eels team in the NRL, we certainly struggled in the middle, in the forward, sorry. And if you're looking at changes, the most logical change will be if Mitch Moses is fit, that he'll come back in at 7. And probably Sam comes back in after getting longer minutes in New South Wales Cup today. It's really whether Riles looks at changes on the edge. Now, Matt Dury's probably now more of a middle than an edge player, although he could play on the edge. The same can be said about Matto. Probably more of a middle than an edge player.
I think Dan Keir is the most likely player to end up on an edge if he's going to go for a different option.
So Dan Keir didn't play today. So that's...
and like I said, it's not the sexy option, but it's a player that'll make his tackles and get involved.
I think I'd be prepared to bite the bullet with Dan because, probably the only argument some people might make is that because he's not that flashy player as you described, 40, he's not going to offer the same in attack potentially as either Lane or Katonga. However, on the basis of current evidence, they're not actually showing us any threat in attack either. And if you've got bad misses being made in defence, then you go like you do with any sort of decision about replacing a player. Is the player that you're bringing in?
Look, I got to put someone on blast here. Mitchie Carper's come in and said you shouldn't have mentioned the ref when the whole team were petulant. Are you deaf? Did you not just listen to the 20 minutes of us putting the team on blast? Both things can be true. The Eels can be dog shit and the refs can be equally dog shit. So don't come in here telling us that we aren't calling the team out. We are literally calling the team out. Don't be stupid. I'm sorry, but this is the problem when you have a live chat sometimes is people come in here and get a little bit barky and want to try and put us in our place. Listen to the podcast. We've literally called out the team. We've called out the coach. We said that Riles got his interchanges wrong. He shouldn't have started with Jermaine Hopgood in the dummy half position. He left his middle forwards out there too long in the first half getting cooked in the heat. The team clearly didn't put in properly. But the referees are also shit. Don't be stupid. Seriously, don't be stupid. That's all I'm asking from chat. Don't be stupid.
And of course, the other thing that we said, even after giving the referees a blast, was
we did not control what we could control. Exactly.
In the race for the bottom, the Eels won by the length of the straight.
Exactly.
In terms of like the players.
This is not like a zero-sum outcome. Two things can be true here, guys, or singular guy.
And not only that, we're now trying to talk about what the Eels can possibly do from a selection perspective to try to turn things around, because it is like...
All right, he can go into the naughty corner for 24 hours. I'm sorry.
The Eels, they don't have the options. I don't believe they don't have the selection options for Riles. But he's got to somehow manufacture change out of this. It's anyway. Let's talk about a real positive just quickly. The Jersey Flegg had a really good win today, and tomorrow we've also got all 4 grades of the Eels in finals football in junior reps. So there is something to look forward to there. Jersey Flegg were outstanding today, John. Really put the cleaners through a Canberra side, and Canberra have done some terrific recruitment of young players to come into their ranks, and to put a number on them was an outstanding result. Questions? Any questions there apart from the person you put in the naughty corner, John?
I just to tell him to congratulations on being the first ever person to be timed out. We've let chat run pretty free, so well done. Look, Jersey Flegg. I got to watch a little bit of it before my stream got bumped out on our shared license, but looked really good. 60s. Just again a really well balanced team. Canberra were not a bad roster by any margin, but Eels just outplayed them across the park. And it was the same things we'd seen in the first month and a bit that have been so good. That combination between Matty Hunter and Dom Destratus down the left edge is just magic. Dom is doing great things as a whole running back rower, and has been one of our favourites in the junior pathways for that reason. Between that and his effort on effort plays, he and his brother Raf have always been fantastic in that regard. But the front rowers laid a great platform. Richard Penasini, we got to see him at his peak today, which was great to see. He's probably not long for the grade if he's going to play like that. He'll come into New South Wales Cup considerations very shortly. But yeah,
Josh Lynn dropped back.
Yeah, Josh Lynn, a late inclusion, and did a great job partnering Hunter there. And I suppose if I had to sum it up in a sentence, the Flegg were just the antithesis of the NRL. And I know they're playing in different circumstances as Lidcombe as opposed to Darwin, and that's obviously a factor when it comes to the conditions. But they are doing everything we want them to do. They are controlling what they can control. They're getting through their sets. Then they're giving themselves the opportunity to make those plays. But also, when they do make a mistake, they are backing up their errors of strong defense. So it is the opposite of what the NRL is doing. And while it is encouraging to see our young players doing that, it just makes it that much more disheartening when you see the complete antithesis at the first grade level. So very happy for our Flegg. And again, they're going to have some really tough decisions in a month to 6 weeks' time when those SG ball players come into consideration. Because there's a lot of talent in that ball squad, but I don't know how you fight your way into this team right now because they're not doing much wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, we'll just say good luck to the junior reps tomorrow. We've already done our preview, so we're not going to talk in any details about those matches, but it all kicks off. I think it's around about 11:30. The first game tomorrow. We'll have the live blogs on TCT, so make sure you follow those. Jump into the chat. John, time for any questions that are there.
Yeah, look, chat's obviously riled up, understandably, after what we saw up in Darwin. So I'll run through some general sentiments. Ben Johnson, good mate of ours, pretty much echoing what we were saying. He was furious with the scoreline, but equally the officials being so far out of their depth. And he also raised one that I spoke to you about, but I forgot to mention on the podcast, the Josh Addo-Carr knock-on and goals, which, if he did knock on, that was a 20-metre restart, not a 10-metre play the ball. So even if they got it wrong, if they thought they got it right, they got it wrong in terms of where the ball was being played. I thought it was a Parramatta dropout. Rugby league gods were cruel. Kel was a fair comment there. Also, with an equally fair comment that football IQ was seriously lacking today. I cannot disagree there, Kel. You are bang on. And that has been a thread, hasn't it, during our bad losses, is the lack of football IQ. And we know that Mitchell Moses raises the team's IQ in that regard by a significant amount, but him being out also highlights just how frustrating it is with a lot of our footballers there. Chris Hill sort of echoing that, horrible efforts by our very senior players. Agreed. We mentioned the run involvements. Didn't get through the defensive stats, which I can't imagine would paint a great picture, because if I look at where are the defensive stats? We only missed 44 tackles, which is kind of crazy when you think about how bad it was, but only 44
if
is still...
If you're not there to make a tackle...
That's an age-old adage, isn't it? Yep. Dave Oz singles out Sean Lane. I agree. We mentioned that he'd be very lucky to hold his place in the team. We answered Slay's question about Maddo missing game time. It's a bit of a coin toss there for the MRC. Jamie says, we were horrible, as was the reffing. Lane and Joe should walk home. Yeah, 2 senior players again. Sean Lane's been a common thread here. That's not good enough. What have we got here? Sorry. Avon said that... What was that context of that about Jason Rolls? Mitch is round 9. Is that right, Jack? Okay. So Mitch round 9 from Jason Rolls in the presser. So didn't get a chance to watch that, so thanks for the insight there, guys. So we have to wait until the Cronulla game, right? After the bye. Going to need a big effort against the Tigers. What do we got here now? Dan Carl and Jack sort of sharing sentiments, say need to seriously start calling players out. No more beating around the bush. I think it's fair to say that we weren't beating around the bush tonight. Dan says, boys, week in, week out, I comment and I reply, these players we have do not care. Dan, I legitimately apologise if you have been making those comments, because I have not seen them in chat. I think that only holds partially true. I think there is a reasonable chunk of this team that clearly does care. The problem is that the players that don't care often the more experienced and senior players, which is a big recruitment challenge that now faces the club. Aussie has an interesting insight here. He's also angry about players not sticking up for another when there is dirty play by the Raiders. We're definitely not united and we play like that. What are your thoughts on that, 60s? We had a couple of moments there where it got a bit fiery, and I think Joe Offengai actually milked a penalty in a scrum for a Liverpool kiss, which was just him leaning into Joseph Tapane. But do you think that the players weren't standing up for each other? I thought not so much about players not standing up for each other. There was one moment in the second half where Isaiah Yongi made a good run, got up to play the ball, and was shoved back to the ground in his face, and it was missed by the referees. But that wasn't so much a player thing. But
no, but I get where the opinion's coming from, because if you have players that suddenly come charging in and, do a little bit of pushing and shoving, and then the game gets stopped, and then the bunker, as it loves to do, has a bit of a look at what's led up to that point, and then you might be a chance of getting the ball. Look, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the sentiment from that, because there's an element of damned if you do, damned if you don't, and we know how the refs will probably police us if the players come rushing in. Someone's probably going to go.
It's also like you want to see players standing up for each other. It is a tricky line to balance too, because on the other end of the spectrum from the neutral games this week, we saw Spencer Lenu seen through the red mist once again, and that can have I know they won, but that easily could have had an adverse impact on his team's result if he'd been sin bin for getting way too feisty backing up his own player.
John, where I want to come in and agree with that last comment, however, because I said, I don't know that it's not a case of that whether it's a case of not coming in and backing each other up. What was sadly lacking tonight was any semblance of intensity.
Yeah.
There just was none. Right now, there is a big difference between an effort and an intense effort, right? Bringing intensity into the game. It was there last week against the Dragons. It was completely absent tonight. Completely absent. So what you saw was an Eels team that, I guess for lack of a better expression, never fired up at any stage. And I think that's probably what you wanted to see. You wanted to see the team fire up so that if something happened from the Raiders, that you saw the Eels either get in their faces or retaliate with, the big hit-ups or the big defensive plays, which we saw last week. For example, Junior levelling a couple of players with the big defensive efforts, right? That's the sort of thing that brings changes to momentum lifts the players around them.
Yep.
There were no moments like that tonight.
Nope.
Right? So I get what you're saying in that regard. There was nothing from the team that either could fire us up as supporters or could fire each other up out there on the field. It was just sadly lacking tonight.
No, so that's actually a good discussion coming off that. Well done, Aussie. Carl says, horrific effort, no game sense or any idea how to play the conditions. True, and true. When can we drop Penasini? And there's definitely I mean, I was on that bandwagon earlier on. I thought that when he was on the left, he was really struggling defensively. I think tonight was more a case of just the bad ball security 60s, which just reared its head in bad moments. If you're talking about any backline changes, you're probably waiting until Zach Lomax is back from the foot injury now, unfortunately. Richard Penasini obviously starting to round in something resembling form, like good form, in the flag level. But with the time he's missed, he's behind the 8 ball for any sort of NRL consideration. And you got
round 11, John. Round 11 when some players become eligible.
You got Hayes Dunster as well, who's another possibility, who's been good in reserve grade when available. He missed a couple of weeks as well. But
Hayes actually had quite a good game.
He wasn't
today.
bad in Reggie's. Yeah, he got heavily involved. We haven't got the numbers right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was over 150 metres on the ground.
But the other thing too was a great finish for 2 tries.
Yes.
The two that he scored, they weren't just catch the ball and fall over the line.
No, he had to go back in field and beat a few defenders and do some work there.
Exactly. So he's in the games that he's played, because he did miss a bit of football as well through injury, but in the games that he's played, he started to look more like the Hayes Dunster of old. And I don't know that wing will necessarily be the problem, because you're probably going to have the Fox and you'd say Zach Lomax.
And then Bailey kicking inside.
And then Bailey's in there as well. So Bailey could be playing on the wing, Zach Lomax back into centre. And then it becomes maybe it becomes a battle between Sean Russell and Will Penasini, or you start to throw in one of the other players like Jordan Samrani into the mix in round 11.
Yeah, so, Samrani will be a strong consideration for selection once he's eligible again. The biggest hope we have in the short term is probably Jack Williams, if he can be ahead of the clock from that knee surgery that he had. But yes, the team is probably bereft of options right now due to some absolutely horrendous injury luck. I'll single Gem out, or GM, for this comment, because there was actually a few people in chat that had the same sentiment, and I agree with it. On top of everything, we need to listen to Andrew Voss commentating on KO. Painful. I'll throw Mick Ennis into that as well. Probably the worst thing about the Eels being so bad outside the actual football result itself was Voss and Ennis being so smarmy about it on commentary. It was painful tonight, 60s.
Yeah. I think we got the usual annoying in the context of comment, and I think what was it? It might have been a try being scored. As an important try in the context of the game. Hello.
Yes, the thing that changes the scoreboard being important in the context of the game. Thank you, Andrew. Look, commentating isn't an easy gig. Like, I'm sitting here taking the mickey, but they definitely got very self-indulgent with the Parramatta Eels tonight. And the Eels, unfortunately, as with the refereeing, opened the door for that sort of interpretation, that sort of commentary, but with their own ineptitude. So got to do better there to take the commentators out of the game. Dave has the right energy here. How's Bailey off an ACL outplaying the whole team? Agreed. Just that is the sort of player Bailey has always been, though. Absolutely wholehearted, all effort. And brings, as we said, brings a bit of quality there too. But
mate, I'll make it simple. Bailey gets my 3 points.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt.
And then I'm struggling.
And then it struggle straight after that. Peter Z, bring out the old football adage Jack Gibson used to say: success starts in the front office, and we are failing in all aspects of that. I don't know if all aspects is true, but I think the recruitment and retention has definitely been a subject both here on TCT and obviously way outside that across the wider fan base. It is a make or break year for the recruitment team. They started well with picking up Dylan Walker mid-season, but we saw a report today, 60s, about Ryan Madison's been offered to the Super League again. that broke, I think, on the Sydney Morning Herald. I could be wrong, could be Daily Telegraph. Apologies if I'm off. And I look, I know that the recruitment team did a great job getting Dylan Walker without much notice about it, if any notice about it. The problem is that we've gotten rid of Reg, we've gotten rid of Guffo, gotten rid of Sevo, opened up a lot of cap space. Getting rid of Ryan Madison, again, it's not a bad move. But the idea of getting rid of Ryan Madison could be more romantic than the outcome if you cannot find the right replacement. So, like I said, make or break for recruitment and retention here. And if they don't get it right this year, the Eels are going to be struggling in the big picture. They've got some good kids coming through. We're speaking highly of this flag class. We speak highly of this SG ball class. And they will be important parts of any sort of rebuild towards an eventual premiership push. But you need to find the right pieces around them. And that means
careful, John. We're not allowed to speak up about any promising players coming through. Yep.
Yeah, promising players.
Yeah. If we talk people up.
Oh, I just got a tip that the Maddo news came out of England. There was a source in England that broke the Madison being shopped to the Super League clubs. Thanks to my good mate Ron there. What else we got here? Let's keep working through it. Gallagher's a bit fired up. He's been put in a few comments in regards to the Eels being a bad start in reference to Steve Kearney. Look, I think that Jason Riles is doing a pretty clearly better job than Stephen Kearney, even just down to the way he talks in press conferences, and it's not about the lads. Again, the lads, I thought the lads tried hard. I think that Steve was barking up the wrong tree the entire time as a head coach. Riles has systems in place that we have seen success with when the teams actually executed them. So I wouldn't be going that far. He also has asked a couple of times about getting Reid Marnie back. I think that Riley's doing a reasonable job. And while Reid is a good dummy half, the problems of our team aren't a dummy half. The problems of our team are with middle forwards that can't truck the ball up and hold on to the peel and can't make tackles, with edge forwards that can't hit a hole and get involved. And obviously with 5'8" now that Dylan's gone. So we've got other priorities. Do you think the club would be interested in bringing back Reid, or at least explore the possibility? You do your due diligence for sure. But you got Jack Hudson in the wings as well. Got a couple of young dummy halves here. I don't think they want to block the way of Reid. And while you do like roster mirroring and having a backup that complements what you already have in your frontline player, you're not roster mirroring by bringing Reid back. You're getting two players that are both high minute, high involvement dummy halves that don't really complement each other as rotational pieces. So I don't know. It's not the craziest thing to suggest by any means. I just think that the club has bigger fish to cook, or catch first, then cook, when it comes to their roster. Keep it going. Jay brings up a great point, Jay Lockie here. First try has been scored in the same spot in the last 3 games. Same players not pushing. The Sluka Fafita try comes to mind. Then you obviously had the Tarpanay try. And it's more, the Sluka Fafita try is 4 games back now, right? But that was very similar to the Tarpanay try. And then was it the try against Manly, I guess? Who scored that opening try against Manly? Or was it the Dragons maybe? I'm having a brain fade. But yes, you can see it's the consistent thing there has been a marker, and it's been Hopgood a couple of times not getting back to their position, opening up a running channel around dummy half, and then one of your the terminology changes depending on what code you're playing, what team you're playing. It was pillar post key back when I was playing Rep Union, but it can be ABC 1 2 3, a few different things. But Sean Lane would have been I suppose the pillar defender on the left, and he did not push up, which allowed Tarpanay to get outside junior and then get over the line. So, yeah, no surprises Lane's name has been invoked there. He's always been, unfortunately, a player capable of defensive laps, and I do think that Riles got it wrong leaving him out there for, I think it was the full 80. He was one of those players that needed to be rotated in the first half.
Yeah, very early on he was struggling, wasn't he?
He was.
The hands were on the hips. And...
He had made his third carry in the second half, I think, and despite that, he was absolutely cooked a few minutes in and was falling into tackles and sort of just being. The fact that the Raiders didn't target him in defense actually saved our backside early on. Small blessing there, given that they still put 50 points on us, but that is the reality. Question from Ronnie: could Walker start at 13 and Hopgood on an edge? I know Hoppy's a bit out of form, but he gives a crack at least. Might be okay there if he's offload. He's put them in the bag at the moment. Yeah, he's definitely put his Hopgood. He's put his offload in the kit bag, playing out a dummy half. not getting those opportunities to promote second phase football. Is he good enough to still play on an edge, 60s? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you this way, John. You're disappointed in him playing in the middle. I can't imagine that he's going to be any too different playing on the edge. Maybe moving to the edge might be what he needs. Maybe it's just that he's struggling in the middle.
Avin, moving on, so I suppose put my point back on that one. Yeah, I don't know. We're clearly bereft of edge options right now if players being injured, out of form, and young guys not quite eligible to be picked before round 10.
And out of form again with... it's like I keep coming back to the fact that the form is just not up to scratch.
And that's with a cup team that's not doing bad. It's just the position is cursed right now. The cup team has been above average, but back row is not so much. Moving on, Avin's fired up. I definitely feel your pain, mate. He says, Craig, he's calling you out specifically, not as a challenge, but to comment to. Been following the Eels for over 40 years. This is the worst start I can remember you. I think 2018 was pretty bad, 60s. The spoon year on the BA. Getting trounced by Manly by 50 points in round 2?
Round two.
Round two. I went out to that one on the hill at Brookvale. Got absolutely cooked. 40 degrees on the northern beaches. 2018's up there, at least in recent history. The year under Ricky Stewart, the years under Steve Kearney. We've unfortunately got a bit of form that is at least challengeable to what we're going underneath right now. And I think what probably separates this in a positive sense is that you have your Isaiah Yongis and your Riley Smiths and your Sam Tuivaitis to at least point at and say, well, maybe we've got something here. Because in those years, think about Ricky Stewart's year, we had Jared Hayne. And that was it. So, I don't know. It's I understand the pain.
What we keep coming back to is what we spoke about through the week, which is if you've got an elite talent like Mitch Moses, and he's not on the field this year so far, which is obviously an issue in itself, but when he is on the field, it is imperative, absolutely imperative, that recruitment and retention puts players around him within the next 4 years that are capable of having this team challenge for a title, because otherwise it's a complete waste of time investing all that money in a player like Mitch Moses if you're not going to give him the support that he needs to make this team a winning team. It's critical. Otherwise, as I said, it is a complete waste having him there. Why spend all the money on
a top two halfback,
arguably the second best half in the world?
Yep.
And
that's why again, circling back, this is a make or break year for recruitment and retention. And if I don't get it right, I think we're going to see a new look recruitment team. That's just purely from a results based standpoint. Well,
look, they've got, as you said, John, the decks are going to be cleared. Let's just put aside any issues or any grumblings from the past. All right. There's already been players moved on. The decks are going to continue to be cleared moving forward. It is now, what is now happening is we will see what sort of team is shaped through recruitment and retention.
And we've spoken about our blueprint, where we feel like with the young players coming through, you need to go find your core difference makers in the positions that you don't have. The question is, are the players A, on the market, or B, as a counterpoint, can the Eels find the players that are contracted that can be difference makers in those positions? So big challenge.
But see, tonight, right? I mean, when we're talking about that, we're talking about some of the obvious things like talent, and you're also talking about, the quality of them as players, their competitiveness, all that sort of stuff that that you're looking for in recruitment. But what we saw tonight was, and yet, yes, the opponents are different, and yes, the venue's different, but we saw a team that last week turned up with some intensity, turned up with some obvious pride in what they were doing, got a result under reasonably tough circumstances against the Dragons, came out tonight and just kept tripping over their own shoelaces all night and had zero intensity.
Yep.
So what we're talking about is a disparity between performances which can only be explained by the players going and having a look or having a long walk in the Hall of Mirrors. Like just looking at themselves and going, what did I produce tonight? Am I really happy with that? Do I want to be defined by how I performed tonight? It's a very simple question.
Agreed.
And if any of them, maybe with the exception of Bailey Simonson, but if any of them come out and say, yeah, I was quite happy. I was reasonably satisfied with
on your bike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, because it wasn't up to standard. And we know that if you're not up to standard up there in Darwin, you're going to get towelled up. And it was almost the worst case scenario tonight, because they just made error upon error upon error and played without any intensity whatsoever. They got the result they deserved. John, unless there's any special questions, I'm just about spent.
There's a couple more relevant ones. Kicks brings up a good point that I actually saw on the coverage and was scratching my head out, because we were doing our halftime meeting in the gym at the stadium, but the Raiders had access to a special cooling room. I don't know if you caught that, 60s, but Kicks was asking, not that it would have made a difference, but was that cooling room only for the Raiders? I didn't see us in a cooling room. So if that's the case, and obviously it's the last game at Darwin, so we're not going to use it moving forwards, but that could have been a bit of a faux pas by the club. Would be really unfortunate. But it wouldn't be the first time opposition's got the jump on us with that sort of thing. What else we got here? A bit of praise from already. Dave does say, lucky we're not the coach. Presses would be ugly. I'll tell you what, if I was ever signing on for a coach, I'd be making a provision with the club that they need $100,000 set aside every year as an allowance for post-match pressers, because Brad wasn't like a faultless coach in any capacity, but he was a good coach. But one of his big weaknesses was not going after the officials here and there, because you need to keep them on their toes and sort of work the narrative. Jason Riles hasn't done it yet, so we have to wait and see, because it can also be a bit of a trap, falling into blaming officials and letting your team off, at least in the public face. But you do need to manipulate the narrative, and the good coaches do that. They put pressure on the official, on the main body, and certainly BA didn't do that. Dave asked, would Moretti ever start? I think it's definitely a consideration moving forwards. Joe's playing time has been going down. Yep. Junior had a bad game tonight, but he's been good for the last month, so I'm not particularly worried about June's, but I think that Ofengahi should be looking over his back. It's about balance for the team too, right? You can't just put your two best middles starting in every game. Sometimes you do need impact off the interchange, but I think that after what we saw tonight, I think that Moretti is definitely going to be a consideration for a starting position. Gallagher says Joffa should not be re-signed. 4020, he is awful and regrets badly since last season. Agreed. I would be very surprised if Ofengahi is retained by the club 60s. Obviously, you want some senior players in the middle, but Joe, this was a season where Joe was actually quite good last year in a team that was struggling. He wasn't incredible, but he was decent. But he's gone backwards. At least to my eyes, he's gone backwards.
Yep.
Did they make any money on bottled water this year? BA was a big aficionado of the HUO. Correct, Peter. Rolls had, to my count, 4 bottles of water. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but he had a couple of bottles of water up there. It wasn't the old texter wall you have in primary school on the desk bottle of water that BA had. So fair watch out there. What else we got? Yes, Dave, again, when you get 5 penalties on the head to start against a 95% completion rate effort, might not be easy. Yes, the Raiders had a great start, and between the whistle the ref gave them and then their own completion rate, they did the right things in these conditions. The Eels did not. So no doubt. Moses must be burning on the sidelines each week. That one's from Slayer. Agreed. We know that Mitch is by far our most competitive player, and he would be absolutely stinging seeing what's going on in the field right now. And what else we got? Hey, so Dave agrees Hayes was good in Reggie's. Michael, good to see you, mate. Moses, Williams, and Lomax will make a massive difference. Agreed. It is just Parramatta's luck that 3 of their biggest sort of heart ticker fire players are out. No doubt that Mitch Moses is the heart of his team, but Zach Lomax has been line-hearted in his efforts this year, and Jack Williams, barring that one miss on Saluka Fafita, has been by far our best hit and stick forward with leg speed as well. So huge outs in all three phases there. Avin says another week, and again, our kick chase was poor. Yes, the kick chase was terrible. I don't think anyone that's trying to defend that is absolutely psycho. The Canberra Raiders made huge inroads against a very lazy kick defense, which I think was exacerbated by the conditions this week. But I do agree it has not been up to the standards that you'd imagine Jason Ryles would want on a week-to-week basis. 60s.
Yeah, agree. 100%.
And then what else is there? That is about it. I'm just making sure I don't get anything. Galgar's thoughts on Gaima. He's been quite average, a little hyped. I think he's been a little overhyped there. Charlie, yeah, not having the start to this year that we would have liked. 60s. I'm not rushing to make judgments on Charlie either way. I think when you look at Charlie, you see one of the few players in our team that actually tries to introduce line speed to the defense. Doesn't always get it right, but he does bring that element of aggression to our defense. I think with the ball in hand, he's still finding his place in the team, trying to balance being a guy that can distribute the ball to the edges and also run the ball. It's the same issue that you see guys like Hopgood facing, and when they get that balance wrong, it looks really ordinary. It really impacts their offensive output. I
think were it not for issues around injuries and some form problems with other players, that Ryles would probably have given Charlie a little bit more time to cook in New South Wales reserve grade.
Yep. Yeah. So a player that would have also benefited from coming into the NRL with a team that has strong form players in the forward pack, no doubt. Yep. Patrick says our forward pack has gone from one of the strongest in the comp 22 to probably the worst overall. Very difficult to disagree. I think, and that's why we keep citing these senior players through the middle and on the edges as huge recruitment issues for the club to look to replace. No doubt that the pack has fallen off, and we made some pragmatic calls with players like Reg, but I think equally so you got more calls to come with, as you mentioned, with Gallagher before, Joe, Sean Lane, Ryan Madison we saw earlier being teased or linked to the Super League. So it looks like the club is trying to kick the tires on these players, or some of them at least. But again, it's easy to say get rid of them, which we do agree with. The club has to find adequate replacements, or better than adequate replacements. So that's going to put even more pressure, as we said, on the recruitment retention. And Ricky, here we go. Ricky mentioned learning from Townsville regarding the game preparation. We haven't. I can't disagree, Evan. Look, the problem I suppose here is that we have a new coach going to Darwin for the first and only time. The Canberra Raiders had the, I suppose, good luck. I don't know if they managed to wrangle it with the NRL, but having that Townsville game 2 weeks ago did prepare them nicely for the trip to Darwin. And we had a team and a coach with a lot of new faces, a lot of guys that hadn't been to Darwin before. Isaiah Yongi, Josh Addo-Carr, Dean Hawkins, Riley Smith, Gideon Katonga, Dylan Walker. Luca Moretti has been to Darwin, yes. But there was half a dozen players there in the Eels team that, as the home team, the team that's been there a decade, had not been to Darwin. And you throw in a new coach that doesn't know the ideal way to prepare for those conditions, and it's, a pretty toxic formula for the home team, and just another check in the box for why we should move on from Darwin like we have.
Yeah, look, I think I don't have any issues with the preparation. I watched them through the week. I didn't have any issue with the preparation for Darwin. They were doing all the right things they needed to do. They went up a day early. You don't want to go up any longer than that, because then you're just going to wear yourself out in those conditions. It is a difficult balance there, exactly. You're not going to acclimatise in 2 or 3 days. So they went up so they could do the captain's run up there and did a bit of community stuff, that sort of thing. Look, we can talk about Darwin till the cows come home. The fact is, it's done. And
that's the lone silver lining out of today. The lone silver lining.
True. That's it.
Well, okay, that and 3 points to Bailey Simonson, and then 2-1. I suppose Chat can have that wrangled out between them. But Bailey, by far the standout player, making his return from his ACL injury from last year. So well done to Bailey. Great bloke, great player, and good to have him back in the fold. 60s, I think it's about time to wrap up. As always, thanks to Para Leagues and thanks to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn and Parramatta for supporting TCT and the tip sheet. It's always great to have them on board. And even with a loss, even for 50-12 loss, still got to give them a bit of love because they give us plenty of support. Big fella, we move on to the traditional Easter Monday clash against the West Tigers. It is a must-win game for the Parramatta Eels. There was a scenario where we're going to be heading into the bye, potentially 3-4 on the season, but now we're hunting that 2-5 going into the bye.
Oh, so much. It's probably best I don't say anything, mate. But, I'd take 2-5 at this stage. Absolutely. It's, yeah. If we can come into 2-5 and then we get Moses back, we might be able to claw our way from the bottom of the table, but need to get something done. But don't forget, junior reps tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
4 finals matches for the 4 Eels teams. Stick with us with our live blog of the day. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.